This is what you've got to look forward to from us until 7 o'clock. With me, I have today Gisela Stuart, former Labour MP for Edgbaston, Birmingham, and of course the chair of the Vote Leave campaign. We're going to kick off things with Gisela in just a moment, and we're going to have Jason Hunter joining us in about half an hour's time. To talk, of course, with, you love it, Brexit, with a bit of Brexit on the side and a sprinkling of Brexit. So if you've got your Brexit questions for either Gisela or for Jason, do give us a call here, 0344 499 1000. That is the number you need. You could tweet us at Talk Radio, or you could text the word talk followed by your message to 87222. That's 25 pence per message on top of your standard network rate. After that, we're going to be joined by Professor Scott Lucas to talk a little bit about Trump. And the last question I'm going to be asking you is, Theresa May told us in her conference speech, where she managed not to have a coughing fit for the set to fall over or to be handed a P45, so it was a bit of a success, but she also said that austerity is over. Is it? How is it so? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. That is the number you need. But first, let me say hello to this week's co-host, Gisela Stuart. Welcome to the show, Gisela.
Hello, Alexis.
It's a pleasure to have you here. Because you are, you were very prominently on the Leave side. You were chair of the Vote Leave, the official campaign. But, of course, you were also a Labour MP up until you decided not to run in 2017. And, of course, you're also from German heritage. So I think some people were confused. They were saying, well, how come the European person who has enjoyed the benefits of free movement doesn't want us to be part of those benefits of the free movement? So thank you very much for joining me today. I really look forward to sharing the next 3 hours with you. We've had a lot of people already tweet and text us about questions they would like to ask you, or questions that you want me to ask you. Now, we are going to be talking about Brexit, but before we came into the studio, we both agreed it will be pointless to have an hour's chat about what was, what wasn't, was it official, what did this, to argue about the minutiae. But there's one question that has come up again and again and again in the people who've, literally hundreds of people who've been tweeting me and the station to ask you. And of course, there's the Vote Leave irregularities with overspending, and the electoral campaign finding Vote Leave in breach of those rules and already fining several members of Vote Leave and the Vote Leave campaign itself. And as I said, I don't want to spend the whole show here because we will not agree on this bit, but suffice it to say that also the Metropolitan Police, I think, just recently has decided, they have said not to go ahead with an investigation straight away because of political sensitivities, not because of lack of evidence, but political sensitivities. So I ask you on behalf of our listeners and for my personal curiosity, what is the deal with Vote Leave? They have been found in breach of electoral law. So what happened?
Shall we try to find agreement?
Well, let's give it a shot. Let's give it a shot. Go on.
I mean, the first thing is that if the premise of this concern is that money determined the outcome, because I think that is what troubles people. Mm-hmm. The Remain campaign spent significantly more money than the Leave campaign.
A couple of million more, yeah.
Well, but that's without counting the 9.4 million the government spent in the last minute on the leaflet they sent to every household, which said Remain.
Okay, so, officially not campaigning, but yeah, I take your point.
Even without that, they spend more money. The second thing is the fact that a whole number of organisations on all sides of the argument were fined by the Electoral Commission actually tells you that there's real unclarity about the law. And I sat on the commission with people like Dominic Greaves, who was on the Remain side, which looked at the conduct of referendums, if you have any in the future. And one of the recommendations was saying that the law actually isn't clear at all. And the third point is Vote Leave is actually appealing against some of those decisions. And one of the last court judgments we had is actually that the Electoral Commission gave us wrong advice. So there is I think it needs to be resolving. I think there needs to be legal clarity. But if people think that money was the issue, I would simply say the Remain campaign spent more money than the Leave campaign, so money wasn't the issue.
So would you welcome a police investigation to the alleged criminal activity?
Well, if the police finds that there is basis for an investigation, then I think they should. I think regulators have a very important role, as does the police. The referral to the police has actually happened in quite a number of other ones. And if they find something, of course they do. I mean, no one is above the law. End of story.
Okay. And what about, I mean, you're now involved in Change Britain. You're the chair of Change Britain. In it, I saw on your webpage, it was, the four things that Brexit was fought on: the laws, money, border. What was the other one? There's four, isn't there?
Our laws, our money, our trade.
Okay.
And
borders.
our taxes.
Which I find very confusing because I don't quite understand what they mean. But I'll pick on law, for example. Yeah. Laws. So our laws, we want to be in control of our own laws. We don't want to be dictated to by the European Court of Justice, etc., etc. But when it comes to our laws, the Electoral Commission has found a breach of law. Why is it that so many Vote Leave supporters are refusing to accept a rule of law coming from our own laws, which you want to have, but the Electoral Commission has said, we find you in breach of law? So why? And again, I want to ask you this question.
Alexis, just hold on for a second. The Electoral Commission found a procedural law, just as you may be caught speeding on the motorway.
Sure.
But it didn't say that this invalidated the outcome. Did it? It was a regulatory. The Remain campaign was fine. The Lib Dems were fine.
Okay, so what do you say to the people then that compare it to a race? Let's say someone's 100 meters race. If Usain Bolt wins it, and then you find out he's been taking steroids, he gets his medal taken away from him. So why is a result allowed to stand if the rules have been broken? Do you not find that a little odd?
Because, not that I for one moment would pretend to be a great football expert, but then I'm old enough to remember 1966 and the arguments over the third goal. But let's not go there.
Yeah, let's not go there.
Let's not go there. But in football, you have occasionally a free kick and a breach of rules, and then breach of rules, you may have a penalty, and then there's a breach of rule which gives you a red card. So breaches of regulatory frameworks have, depending on their seriousness, certain consequences. And on this one, the Electoral Commission imposed fines on the Leave campaign, it imposed fines on the Remain campaign, imposed fines on trade unions, and imposed fines on a whole host of people. So I think you're making a huge jump. It's a bit like football analogy, because you've got a free kick. World Cup's off.
I'll tell you what. I tell you where I'm going to. And at no point do I think that, well, actually the rules were broken, therefore the result doesn't stand. We're way past that. Just like the same way that a lot of people saying, well, it was advisory, therefore we don't have to put it. I think we're 2 years down the line. Too much has been done and said. We can't just ignore the fact that we had a vote. There are serious, I think when people look back in history, I think there's serious mistakes that were made in accountability. For example, if David Cameron's government stands up in Parliament, and I think you were there at the time, when they stood for the referendum and said, look, let's have a referendum. It's going to be advisory, therefore we don't need a supermajority or a minimum turnout. And then to leap from that to whatever you decide we will put in action, I think that's slightly dodgy. I think that's not the way you need to run a referendum.
Which is why, as we agreed, we will try and look at the future.
Sure.
But the bit about the past is, by the way, I'm the last one to want to defend David Cameron. However, the piece of legislation which provided the framework for the referendum, equally triggering Article 50, which said we will leave in March next year, was overwhelmingly voted for by MPs of all sides of the House of Commons. So you can't, the opposition didn't oppose. But the future is, that's why I sat on a big commission which University of London did, University College of London, on the future conduct of referendums, which said you shouldn't call them, if you only call them because of internal party political divisions, which is probably something Cameron could be guilty of. But once you do call them, and once you say to people, it's a once-in-a-generation choice, and if 72% of the people bother to turn out, big turnout, and 17.4 million people, more than any political party has ever been voted for, tell you to do one thing, I do think in a parliamentary democracy it is then the duty of those who are elected to implement that decision.
Okay. We're going to get on to our proper Brexit chat when Jason joins us as well, because a lot of questions are coming in. Again, I've been confused by a lot of the language used by Brexiteers, the laws, the borders. I mean, for example, let's take borders. We have control of our borders.
No, we don't.
Well, you say that, but are you dual citizenship?
No. I have British passport.
British passport. Okay, I have a German.
Okay,
I have a German wife.
Yep.
I travel from Berlin through to Belgium. That's truly borderless. There is a sign saying you have now entered Belgium or you have now entered Germany. There is no borders. Anybody that comes to this country has to pass through a border. We're outside of Schengen, and we also have the ability to send EU nationals back after 3 months if they cannot prove that they're not a burden to the system. So how do we not have control of our borders?
Well, first of all, in terms of borderless, occasionally if you go from Italy to Austria or Austria into Germany, you will find there are still borders. The difference.
Okay, I haven't seen one, but
there are, particularly if you're in a lorry, they will stop you. But the difference between is whether I think every nation and every government wants to make the decision as to who is allowed into the country and who isn't.
Mm-hmm.
What we've got at the moment is the ability to ask you for your piece of paper, but we don't have the right, with over 350 million, to decide whether you are here. And I was a Birmingham MP, a very multicultural city, and some of the people from the Indian subcontinent found it quite difficult to accept why they, with a deep history of links to the British Isles, had different rights from mainland Europe. Whereas when we say control of the borders, it's the British front bench, it's the Conservative front bench and the Tory back bench, when they look at the immigration policy, who will decide our entire immigration policy, not an immigration policy which has got disproportionate rights for 350 million.
But you accept the fact that we have control of our border per se.
No, we don't.
But we have the right.
We don't have the right to say who can come in and who can't come in.
We don't from the EU. The EU.
But that's my
okay. But when you have EU citizens who are net contributors to the economy, and you also have the right that the moment those people become a burden, you can ask them politely to go back to where they came from.
And how many have we done that to? How many?
Well, that is a successive government's failure to pick that up. But Theresa May, when she was Home Secretary, had the right to do it. She chose not to. And previous Home Secretaries from Labour as well had the right to do it, and they chose not to. That is not the EU's failure.
No, Alexis, let me. No, I'm not saying that everything which is not right here is the EU's failure. It's sometimes that we kind of didn't face up to some things. But let's just go back. I remember when we first came into the House of Commons, the Labour government in '97. We tried to introduce ID cards, which is everywhere on the continent.
Yeah.
There is a singular piece of paper where people show their right to be here. For reasons which, again, I understand are deeply entrenched in the British sense of what you should do, we don't have that piece of paper.
Well, you see, I'm with you. So as a Greek national.
So what you are showing is that you had a set of laws which had a theoretical possibility, but we know were never implemented. And whenever that happens, that's bad for democracy, when people think laws are being implemented.
But instead of saying there is more that we can do as a nation and as a government, it was the finger pointing of that bad EU, and that's why we should leave.
Did you not say you weren't going to rerun the referendum? I mean, I'm happy to go down there, but then we are rerunning the referendum.
We're not rerunning it, but I do think that the EU took a lot of the brunt of what actually were UK government decisions. The decision not to ever really take up the ability to send EU nationals who are a burden to the system back, that is a UK decision. That has nothing to do with the EU.
Let me tell you, as a constituency MP, this notion of sending people back who are reluctant to leave, EU nationals and not EU nationals, is actually a process which you shouldn't speak of so lightly. But let's just come back to the controls. It was my Labour colleagues, for example, who said it was a big mistake that in 2004 we were the only country which, upon accession, actually didn't have temporary restrictions on the accession countries. But that is all in the past. What happened is that and I now take a real Labour perspective, what grieved me on the Labour side is when you had communities in the northeast, the northwest, who really were on the receiving end of being undercut in their wages, who found it difficult to actually plan for their school places and all those kind of things. And whenever they complained, we as politicians turned around to them saying, oh, you can't talk about it, this is racist, rather than saying, there are problems with managing migrations. You need to plan ahead. We didn't do any of those things. So I think what happened is a culmination of not facing up to problems and the EU not changing, because remember, the immigration problems in the rest of the EU are very serious. You know, we can talk about that later, about what's happening in countries like Germany in the elections, Sweden, Hungary, and those. The EU didn't face up to it, and the United Kingdom decided that their way of taking back control was saying, now we decide what our immigration policy is.
Okay, well, we're going to have Jason Hunter join us in a couple of minutes. A final quick question, because obviously we've never met before, but why did you decide not to run in the 2017 election?
Oh, that was a deeply personal decision which I took in 2015. In 2012, my husband died rather young at the age of 65, and I got to the point where I thought Fixed Term Parliament Act. I thought the next election would be 2020. I thought by then, I have grandchildren. I'll be 65. I will have done 23 years. I will do something else. So the 2017 election came earlier than I had expected. But
I think than anybody had expected.
But the decision not to stand, the decision to say my public life finishes, was one which I actually took in 2015, and it had very personal reasons.
And nothing to do with Brexit, of course, because it was 2015.
It was 2015.
Right, we're going to take a little break, but coming up, Jason Hunter will be joining us. I'd love to hear your thoughts. My question to you is, it's the end game now. We are being sure that the next week is crucial in Brexit. Theresa May is going to have to do some very, very tricky manoeuvring, both in Brussels and in her own cabinet, starting from this weekend. Are we going to see mass resignations from the government? Are we going to see a government collapse? Who knows? But it's the end game. What do you think should happen next? Jason Hunter join us after the break, and I want to hear from you. 0344 499 1000. That is the number you need. What do you think should happen next?